This week on the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast.
Have patience. One of the things that I think in my own career I've done in the past, especially when I was first starting to write, and you get the bug and you're like, oh, I really want to write a book and I really want to get it published, but it's not ready.
Welcome to the Red Sneaker Writers Podcast. News, interviews, and writing tips for people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them achieve it. Your host is the nationally best-selling author of more than 50 books, William Bernhardt.
Hello, sneakers, and welcome back to the podcast. Man, everything is in a flurry in my world. Of course, my new book, Shameless, releases on March 22nd. That's the third in the Kinsey Rivera legal thriller series. And it seems like even though I have technically written the book, there's always a ton of work to be done at the last minute. Plus, as soon as I turn around twice, we're launching on a spring break family ski vacation in Taos. So everybody has been trying on, padded, scotch-guarded outfits. Not really my best look, but getting excited. I usually ski in a Tigger sweatshirt, but don't tell everybody else that I am so completely without fashion sense. And speaking of vacation, you just got back from a trip too, right, Jesse?
I did. I was on a Star Trek themed cruise, and as nerdy as that sounds, it was delightful. And
yeah, I think it sounds great.
I mean, there's only like 2,000 people on the ship, and 20 of those are Star Trek-esque celebrities who are getting just as drunk as you are, and it's a lot of fun. There was some great karaoke, let me tell you.
The alcohol, I assume, was to kill any germs or viruses.
That was my theory, my running theory.
Right.
I had at least 12 pina coladas over a span of a week. So
not in the same night, though, right?
No, I think my max was 3 one day.
Fantastic. Hey, I have been talking about WriterCon a bunch lately. That's our annual Labor Day weekend writers conference. But while I'm thinking about it, I should also mention that I'll be hosting a small group writing retreat in Eureka Springs, the most beautiful place on earth to be writing, June 15th through 17th. This is 5 days of intensive work on your work in progress, led by me. There'll be lots of feedback and editing and analysis and discussion of whatever relevant writing topics come up. But small group means I limit it to 8 people. And it's first come, first serve, space obviously limited. So I offer those spots first to my Red Sneaker Writers. Yesterday, I posted about it on the Red Sneaker Writers Facebook page. And now I'm telling all of you on this podcast. Next week, I'll take it live, but right now it's not even on my webpage yet. So if you think you might be interested in joining us for this 5-day writers retreat, email me. It's willbern@gmail.com. That's WILLBERN@gmail.com. My super special guest today is Erika Lewis, the critically acclaimed author of several fantasy novels, but her new book marks her debut in the world of middle grade fiction. The book is Kelcie Murphy and the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts, which involves a magical school brimming with Celtic mythology and action and danger. And I can't wait to talk to her about it. But first, the news. Well, our first news story you may well have already heard about because it's been all over. Amazon has decided to shutter all of its physical, meaning brick and mortar bookstores. The website's still there, don't worry. But
God, I hope so.
60 odd, retail locations are shutting it down. So just put this in historical perspective, first Amazon basically killed traditional bookstores, then it opened its own, and now it's killing its own bookstores. Apparently, this is part of some larger brick and mortar strategy because they're keeping the Amazon Go stores. Those are the little grocery stores, and something called Amazon Style. Those, of course, famously use the cashierless technology. You just go in, you've got to have the Amazon app and put stuff in your bag and walk out, and somehow it knows what you bought and bills you, and you don't have to check out. And of course, they still own Whole Foods, and I guess Whole Foods is going to start getting the cashierless technology. But I mean, this is such a strange back and forth. Jesse, explain this to me. What is going on here?
I like how Amazon had the gumption to be like, you know what, like we ran these people out of business, but we can totally do this separate business. And they're like, oh wait, no, we can't. It's hard.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I went to one of those once in New York City when I was visiting, and it was perfectly nice. It was basically like an airport bookstore, maybe a little larger, but not nearly. I mean, the whole point of Amazon to me was everything is there. You can buy any book there, but you sure couldn't in this little store. I mean, a Barnes and Noble would have more titles, so I never got that.
Yeah, I did see one of those Amazon Go stores, I think in the Orlando airport. But it was like completely walled off from the rest of the airport. Like you really only had one entrance point where you had like, I guess, scan your card or whatever. And I think they only let like one or two people in at a time. It was very strange and very sterile feeling.
Yeah. Well, maybe that was because of the COVID lockdown.
That could also be true.
I mean, I've wondered if we all know that Amazon is probably looking down the throat of possible antitrust litigation. Is that the motivation? Or are they thinking, well, we could be accused of controlling both online and brick and mortar sales, so before that, and thus controlling the market. So maybe if we got to dump one, let's dump the ones that aren't making all that much money. I mean, I'm just trying to come up with some logical rationale here.
I think they just thought it would magically work like the website does, and not realizing that you have to curate when you have a limited space. And Amazon's terrible at curating, as we all know when we try to search for something.
Right.
So
yeah, the Amazon name wasn't enough, I guess. All right. Story number 2. Jesse, I think you're going to be all over this one. In fact, you were the one
excited.
who emailed me about it.
I did. I was very excited.
Brandon Sanderson raised $15 million in one day on Kickstarter for his 4 secret novels. Now, just to put this in perspective, he set a new one-day record for raising money on Kickstarter for $15 million. He's currently in the number 2 slot for all time raising the most money, and he's still got a month to go on this thing. So I think there is a very good chance he's going to, and this is an author who's making this kind of money. And it's, I mean, it's not just books. You get all kinds of swag depending upon what level you pitch in at. But just to make this clear, Brandon Sanderson has historically been traditionally published, primarily at Tor, I think, although he's been keeping his own ebook rights for about a decade now. So, you know, next time you hear somebody making fun of self-publishers, published authors, mention, well, Brandon Sanderson is one, and J.K. Rowling, come to think of it, is another, because they both held on to their ebook rights for a long time. But now he's taking a deep dive into print publishing, which he's done a couple times before, but not on this scale. And putting out these super cool looking, either leather bound or slipcased or whatever you want, which I bet his traditional publisher would not be willing to do. He's even built a company called Dragonsteel Entertainment, which at this point employs 30 people, including a marketing director, a concept artist, a continuity editor, and a human resources director. He even has a warehouse for his books in Pleasant Grove, Utah, not very far from where he lives. Okay, Jesse, you're my science fiction fantasy expert. What's going on here?
Well, I love this because one, he, again, he has to hire a continuity editor. That's how dense his stories are. And I know he has alpha and beta readers. And if you're a fantasy nerd, like, yes, you might read the ebook of a thing, but you're still going to want a fancy hardcover of it. And he knows that. And, other Kickstarters he's done has allowed you to get like a very beautiful bound version of some of his books. And I think this is a great idea. I don't know what his problem with Tor might be and why he had to do this.
Right.
Because I feel like he makes Tor a lot of money.
Right.
And
Had to or wanted to. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, maybe he just wanted to do this on his own to see if he could.
Traditionally, go ahead.
Oh, he seemed pretty surprised too about this.
About how well it turned out?
Yeah. He did not expect this.
Usually the reason people, this wouldn't work for anybody, right? This is going to be somebody with a major following, obviously, and a fanish following.
He has a very dedicated fan base, like multiple subreddits about Brandon Sanderson's books on the Reddit.
And science fiction fantasy, so they're good with computers, right? They're
Yep.
gonna like it. But usually there are other big names who could probably bring this off, but the reason they always say why they're sticking with traditional publishing, even though they probably could survive publishing on their own, is bookstores. They want print copies and they want to place them in bookstores, but he may be single-handedly inventing yet another of the many paths to publishing existing in the world right now. Other people have kickstarted books, of course, but not on this level. This is really extraordinary. I don't think it's going to eliminate traditional publishing, but it is creating a new path.
I think it gives authors the ability, at least authors with followings, to do sort of special projects that maybe publishers aren't interested in or don't think will sell enough.
Right.
So,
and some of you Red Sneaker writers listening to this may be thinking, yeah, but how does this affect me? I'm not sure I could raise 15 million in a single day. Here's the takeaway, sneakers, and you've heard me say this before. Publishers, authors really need to be entrepreneurs today, whether you want to or not. We all wish we lived in an era when you could just sit in your garret and type books and send it off and never worry about it again. But that is not the world we live in. I'm not sure we ever did. That may be more a myth than anything else, but it is clearly not true. You have to take an interest in the business side in all likelihood. If you're going, it might be a few who don't. Although, didn't you even read this week? Cormac McCarthy is coming up with 2 new short books that nobody knew existed. Why 2 at once? Well, it seems to me that to grab publicity. Of course, it's a good PR tool. Nobody is immune at this point. Writing is an important part. I hope it remains. The quality of the work becomes number one, but you're going to have to look at other aspects of the writing world as well to succeed. All right, enough news. My guest today is Erika Lewis, the author of, among other things, Game of Shadows and The Color of Dragons, Firebrand, and now a new book for young readers, as I said, Kelcie Murphy and the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts. Hey, Kelcie, welcome to the podcast.
I was listening to all the news. It was fascinating. I didn't know that about Amazon.
Thanks for being here.
No, I have.
Really? Have you been in an Amazon brick and mortar store?
All day. I'm on school visits here, so segueing into that.
Right.
Yeah. To drop off Amazon packages, like a lot of times when you have a return, they send you to the store nearby. At least that's what ours does in California. And so, but it is a kind of a strange hodgepodge of stuff inside their stores. I'm not really sure it was working very well. So anyway.
Well, if you want to go again, you better do it quick.
Right.
Okay. Traditional first question.
Yeah.
If you could give a writer out there, aspiring writer, or any kind of writer, one piece of advice. I mean, you've published many books at this point. If you could give them one piece of advice, what would it be?
Have patience. One of the things that I think in my own career I've done in the past, especially when I was first starting to write, and you get the bug and you're like, oh, I really want to write a book and I really want to get it published, but it's not ready. The book isn't ready, or it's not finished, and you're still talking about it. You're already out there talking, and it takes time. Especially the first, the second, the third, because a lot of them end up in a drawer because they're not so great when you're first learning how to do it. It's a skill, 10,000 hours, as they say. And having that patience saves you a lot of anxiety too, like, okay, it'll go out when it's ready.
Yes. So good attitude, except at this point in your life, you're probably getting deadlines, right?
Oh no, now
When's
I'm
Kelcie
way
2?
past that. 2 is next year, and I'm in
Yeah.
edit on book 2 right now. Which is very exciting. So,
Well, tell us about Kelcie Murphy. What's this all about?
So this is the story of a 12-year-old girl who is a foster child from Boston, Massachusetts. Originally, she was abandoned there, literally in Boston Harbor in the freezing winter, and ends up in the foster care system with a really insane social services caseworker who keeps putting her in the most awful places she can possibly stay, these terrible group homes, until she suddenly moved back to Boston, and on a field trip with her class for the first day to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. While she's there, she is attacked by crazy fairy creatures and forced to unleash a horrible evil. But it is her first clue to finding out who she really is, because she was 5 when she was abandoned and has no memories of herself. She's not sure who her parents are. She doesn't know anything about her background. And so, as they say, the inciting incident, she has to decide if she's going to go and figure out who she is or not. And of course she goes. And she ends up at the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts, which is a different kind of a magic school.
Right.
Sort of.
And there she discovers, I assume I can say this since it's on the book jacket. There she discovers she's, correct my pronunciation, a Sega.
Yeah.
Shunned otherworld creature.
Yes. Well, this actually technically, okay, so I'll give you a quick explanation of the school. So the Academy for the Unbreakable Arts, a lot of this story is set in Irish mythology, which is a part of Celtic mythology, Celtic meaning all of European different kinds of mythologies, and Irish itself, talking about the children of Danu, the Tuatha De Danann, and the different gods and goddesses who walk the earth there, about the same time period as the Greek gods. So this school is run by a legendary teacher warrior goddess who's right out of Irish mythology named Skyhawk, and she had a school that was on the Isle of Skye. The ruins are still there. Actually, I went to them. And the place is called Dunsky Castle, and it translates to the Fortress of Shadows, which is, her name is the shadowy one when you translate it, and so that's why it's all tied in. So a lot of the story about the school is taken straight from the mythology. The tests to get in, to figure out if you even have any powers, the Bridge of Leaping, the parts of the story that are around that. And so this school is built like hers around a military magic school. So it's really for shapeshifters and for people with super strength, and there's the Adder Den. So each den has an animal name, and the Adder Den are kind of like Jedis. They've got, telekinesis and telepathy. And then there's the Sega Den, which is elementals. So she discovers, she finds out, she ends up in that den, which the biggest trader of all of the lands was from that den as well, and from the background that she would then come from. And so that's what she discovers when she gets to the school, that she's somehow tied to this group of people called Fomorians.
Cool. While I'm thinking about it, I can see there are people listening to this live stream. I want to invite you, if you got questions you'd like to ask Erika, please go for it. Type them into the chat box, which I'm going to open up right now, and we'll make sure those questions get answered.
Definitely.
Hey, Erika, so I'm listening to this, and don't get mad at me, but I'm getting kind of a Harry Potter vibe. Are you okay with that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't think there's ever enough magic schools in books for me personally. I mean,
apparently not.
But I actually I think once the story is very different in the sense that it's not after the first book, it's not really just about the school. It's about the world. There's a big war going on, a physical war in the other world between the lands of summer and the lands of winter. And it kind of grows out of just the school, meaning it becomes almost a little bit, if I was going to compare it to something, I'd give it a touch of Avatar: The Last Airbender, the animated series. I don't know if you've seen that. It's one of my favorite things. Yeah. So it does have elements of Harry Potter in the sense that it's a school and everybody's assigned to something. But it's a very different kind of magic. And there are so many magic schools out there. I honestly, and to me, I really do. I think for me personally, I'll read them all. So, yeah, it is
cool.
a magic school.
Very
I don't mind
cool.
Harry Potter.
Where'd the idea for this come from? Is it, are you steeped in Celtic mythology, or what happened?
I kind of am. So during university, when I went to Vanderbilt, and I spent more than a year abroad in London and in Ireland, and I just sort of I've always been a little weird and liked ruins and creepy graveyards and all that kind of fun stuff. And so as I started, when I was studying there, I did a lot of traveling and discovered a lot of old ruin sites. And as I got older, I just got more and more interested. And we would always go back to Ireland. It's sort of like a home away from home for me, right. And now my family. And one after Game of Shadows came out, my editor said, you have a great middle grade voice. Would you consider coming up with some kind of Celtic mythology story around that? And I was like, oh yeah, I think I know what I have to do. So I sadly for my kids, threw them all in one of those tour bus things, and we went all the way from Edinburgh up to the Isle of Skye and stopping at every Outlander spot you can imagine, which was fine for me. But so many people were in love with Outlander and they were shooting it all over Scotland. It was so much fun. But anyway, I had asked the tour person if she could stop at this Dunsky Castle, and she actually didn't know what it was because it's out of Irish mythology and not Scottish, which is kind of interesting because the Isle of Skye is now part of Scotland. And she was like, oh yeah, let's stop there. So I went there, and I was sort of sitting and standing in front of the Bridge of Leaping, which my daughter was about to step on and freaked me out. And I was like, no, it's going to throw you off. But I sat down, I just started writing out what I thought would be a really cool story about, and I grew up spending summers in the Boston area, in Massachusetts and Worcester. Also, my grandparents were up there. And so I always wanted to set something in Boston. I just thought it would be really fun. And we did a lot. So the idea kind of came from traveling, and it's just always been
nice.
Writing about Irish mythology.
So I gather this is intended to be the first book in a series. Do you have a master 7-book plan or something like that in mind?
At the moment, it's a 3-book plan.
Yeah, okay. It's going to get through school a lot quicker.
Well, it's going to, my guess is going to end up that it's going to be 4 total books. But right now I've had 3, greenlit, I guess is the word, right?
Fantastic. Yes. I'll go with that.
Yeah.
Hey, we got a question from Jenny, who, first of all, is already telling you that she's in love with your story and she's going to buy it.
Yay.
And then says she's wondering, do you think traditional publishing or self-publishing is the way to start today? You got opinions on this?
I think it depends upon the genre you're writing, the who you're writing for. In some ways, it would be really hard to be self-published for kids.
12-year-olds are not so likely to be.
They're
Amazon
not e-reading. Well, and they're not e-reading. So, the one thing that I think that self-publishing has for it is that, like if you are part of those subscription services, if you're writing, romance novels and crime, I personally have had a good experience with traditional publishing, and I know that it goes into that patience thing. You want to get your book out there, you want to get it up in the marketplace, but there's a lot of legwork that goes behind self-publishing. It's a lot of hitting the ground, knocking on doors.
Absolutely.
I think it just depends upon what you have the ability to do.
Right.
In my opinion.
Follow-up question, same source. Do you find travel helps your creativity?
Yes, very much. Yeah. And sometimes I like to just get lost. So, for me, my favorite thing is to end up in a city, I did this in Paris a lot, because I don't know the city well at all. And I would just sort of wander into places, which may not be always the best thing to do, but I would just wander around and see what I could find and end up in some, you end up in some strange places. And for me, your imagination just, it goes on. It's a journey of its own. If you have the time and the patience to sit there and look at different things. And we were in Ireland the last time we were there, and we were staying at this hotel, and I was having one of those days where I was tired of traveling with a very large family. I'm like, I'm gonna go get lost, and I found St. Bridget's Well, and that was back behind everything, and I was took notes about what it looked like, and there's some of that actually in this book towards the end of it. It's the best for me anyway.
Cool. So let's talk about your writing process a little bit. What's a typical writing day look like for you?
I'm an early riser, so I tend to get up around 6:30 or so at the latest, and I do have to help my kids get out, but once they're gone, I try to plow through while the caffeine is going until it's lunchtime. And if I can get through lunchtime, then I'll take a break. I find my afternoon hours are kind of vegetative, from about, I don't know what it is, at about 1 to about 3:30. I just tend to zone out. So I try to exercise, or there's always so many emails that you have to, the administrative side of everything. And then at night, depending upon whether anyone, whatever I have to do, for the family, if I don't, I'll actually go back to working, because I find the evening hours can be pretty good, especially when I have to work on stuff that's comics. I don't know why my craziest ideas tend to come to me at night. So,
important question. Do you have a cat?
Yeah. No, I have a dog.
Oh, well, see, I get up about 5 every morning, but that's just because my cat wakes me up and insists that I see Jesse's cat's been walking around behind him during this podcast. So you're the only cat. Yeah, we have dogs too. It's not.
Well, our dog wakes us up. Yep. She literally is a giant golden retriever, and she jumps up on the bed and stands over my head.
Oh, wow. That'll wake you.
I'm hungry. But no.
So what about the process? How do you develop a book? I'm going to guess you're probably thinking about, or maybe you've already written it, I don't know, Kelcie Part 2, whatever that's going to be called. How do you develop a book? What's your process like?
I'm more of a plotter than the prancer. It will end up being a hybrid of it, because I think anybody who writes an outline tends to go off it at some point. Otherwise, it's just the way it is. And
the book is better for it.
Oh, definitely. At least from my experience. But for me, I generally like to start out with a beginning of a roadmap all the way through to the end. Typically the publisher requires that somewhat too. They want to know, before you're launching into the book, like, okay, give me a little synopsis of what it is. Yeah. If it's a new book, and even after that though, like the way I like to work with my editor is, I'll send them, if it's this is my first book too in that way. So I'm like, okay, here's a synopsis, 3-page synopsis. And then I tend to expand that out, myself. And then, it'll either work out where I go off at halfway through, or like I'm writing, I wrote first draft of book 2, and realized the first 50 pages really belong in book 3, and I had to rewrite the first 50 pages. It's okay. It's part of the process.
That's right. Just save it,
Yeah. Oh yeah. No,
don't
I'm
cut
got a
it,
great
put it
start
in
on
a
book
file.
3. I got a
Yeah,
great start on book 3. But
that's the positive way to look at it.
yeah, that's
No,
just what happens, right?
yeah,
So
no, I outline too, but I find, every day after I finished writing whatever, I go to the outline and mess with it
yeah,
because every day it changes for the better. I mean,
yeah.
maybe you write more detailed outlines. How detailed are your outlines?
Um, it depends. Usually I'll stick to just keeping them at 3 or 4 pages. They're not like chapter outlines.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm working on a graphic novel, I definitely chapter outline, because
Mm.
if it's a graphic novel, I'm working with an artist, and so they're taking every chapter as I'm working on the other part of it. So it's a little bit of a different process.
Mm-hmm.
But for prose novels, it's usually just 3 to 4 pages, and then I'll go tweak it.
Yeah. Okay. First draft, and then how much revision thereafter? Do you get it all right the first time,
Oh,
or?
never. Like I said, I just had to move the first 50 pages to book 2.
Right.
No. I at least 2 drafts,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes 3 before it'll go into a line/copy edit phase.
Meaning that's when you start sending it to beta readers, or
No. My editor. I typically, if
you're
it's a
at your
if it's
publishing
new,
house?
exactly. If it's a book that hasn't been sold, then yes, I
Mm-hmm.
work with I have a little group that I work with, and I send I send chapters. We, 1 chapter at a time if it's something new,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, cool.
I'm brainstorming it. Yeah, we go back and forth on every chapter, but with the stuff that's already been picked up, I tend to just send that to my my editor at my publisher.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah,
Okay, so how long did it take? I'm sorry, I should have
yeah,
prepared for this, but I'm going to steal the one
yeah.
behind me because this
Okay.
book has such a magnificent opening. How
Thank you.
long, you won't sue me if I read this, right? How long did
No.
it take you to come up with this opening sentence? There were no seismic quakes, horrendous storms, nothing suspicious at all to warn Kelcie Murphy that she was about to unleash the greatest evil the world has ever known. I mean, are
Well,
you in, Jesse? How can you not go on reading a book after that? That's right.
thank you. There's a really funny story
You have
around
to know
that
what
first
happens next,
chapter.
right?
Yeah.
They're great.
It was a different chapter. In fact, it was 2 chapters, or maybe even 3. And my editor called me after we were going into copy edit, and she said, "Sales wondered if you could start at the museum." And then they gave me 5 days to hand in the new first chapter. And
Wow.
I honestly thought I was going to commit,
Which
Harry
was
Carey.
all new.
That whole first chapter in there, which
Yeah.
turned out much even better, I mean, than the original. It's completely new. And the first 2, I guess, first 3 chapters we were literally going into copy edit. And so I had written 3 days worth of drafts that were terrible, and I was sending them to my beta readers, and we were going back and forth and back and forth. And I was like, okay, I woke up in the middle of the night. I had that sentence in my head, and I sat down and I wrote effectively what the chapters. And I had literally like 1 day left to get it in.
That's
So.
impressive. I've done a lot of books with traditional publishing, and don't take this wrong, I've had a lot of great editors, but I can't think of a time anybody said, "How about this for the opening?" and the book got better. That never happened.
In this particular instance, it was a question of middle grade and the fast pace of getting into the story really quickly. And, I always like to scan through reviews sometimes, and I love how some of them are like, that opening went by so fast. And then the rest of them were like, it took a while to get into the story. It's sort of like everybody's got a different feeling about how quickly they want the pacing of a story to go, which is so fascinating to me. I feel like the story did end up in the right place for it. And I think that it was a fine note. I think that the opening sentence is definitely much stronger. So
no, that's a great
there you go.
opening. That's a bestseller opening.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent. You have any particular tricks for bringing characters to life, for making them vivid and leap off the page at the reader?
Well, for me, and in this particular book, because it was middle grade, and I think in most of the stories, I tend to write very flawed characters. For me, that's important because it doesn't matter whether you're writing a kid or an adult. Nobody's perfect, and I in this particular case with Kelcie, I wanted to write a kid who'd had a really tough existence, and because of that she doesn't trust, and she doesn't even make a lot of friends because she's moved around so much. So I really wanted to get into the mindset of someone who was learning how to be a better friend all the way through the story. Because I feel like for kids, that's something they're learning too, especially as they're getting from elementary into middle school and on, because it's not an easy thing. And so that was one of the things about Kelcie in particular, is that she's tough and edged. And so for me, I like to sit down and make characteristic sheets and then figure out sort of like what the touchstones would be, what would be the things that they'd have in their pockets or in their backpack, same thing with an adult. If it's a person that, do they lose their keys all the times, or do they know where they are? Right. Kinds of like little things that are about characters that just make you feel connected to them. And especially when you're writing fantasy, I think you really want to give very easily recognizable and connectable traits to characters, even if they're, ogres or something. You want them to feel, we all felt for Shrek, right? He was completely
That's right.
Flawed and I don't know, there's just something about adding those touches into a character, even if they're fantastical, making them feel very real.
Sure. Well, that's what makes a book come to life. And I would think particularly in something like this, when you're creating this enchanted world and you want people to come in and have fun.
Very much.
Everything seemed vivid and lively.
Yeah. Very much. And keeping it feeling like it unexpected too, though, still.
Yeah. Great. We talked before about, authors being entrepreneurial and having to do more than just type. How involved have you been with book marketing?
Well, a lot. I think it's impossible for you can't get into this business as an author, because it is a business, and feel like you're not going to have to do a lot of self-promotion. Right. It's a big part of it. Working with schools on the kids side of things, working with independent bookstores on for all books coming out. You really have to be able to walk in the door and introduce yourself and market yourself. And anytime I'm in a new town, I'm knocking on an independent bookstore's door, or Barnes and Noble, or wherever it is. I'm knocking on the doors and saying, "Hey, it's nice to meet you. Do you have any of my books here? Do you want me to sign them?" Because you're helping them sell stuff, right? It's all about partnerships, and same with librarians and teachers, and communicating as closely as you can, and being a part of those worlds. It's a hard thing for authors to do, because we tend to be more shy and uncomfortable with these things. I think that having that 10 seconds of courage is really important, and just even pitching your book is so awkward. Hey, I'm this, and this is this, and it's a really hard thing to do, but it is a part of it. Right. And like right now, I've been at schools all week long, giving a really fun talk about origin stories and talking
Nice.
about all different how characters are made, and then my origin story, sort of walking through with 6 and under, I guess 3rd through 6th grades, and that also is a big part of it. You just have to get over any kind of fear and get out there and do it. So
Absolutely. Well, I mean, yes, this is probably the part of the writing biz that most authors are least comfortable with, but
yeah.
it's even less comfortable to have a book that tanks. So maybe
very
it's worth
true.
forcing
That's
a
very
smile
true.
and meeting people. All right, one last.
The meeting
Go
people's
ahead.
kind
Go
of fun.
ahead.
No, I was just
What?
gonna say the meeting people's fun, and the working for me, walking into a classroom and actually being able to be out because of all the
Mhm.
COVID stuff, and is actually just the best because they're so enthusiastic. You actually are like, okay, I've got to get back into book 2 because they got to get that book into their hands. It makes you feel like it's so much worthwhile. It's so.
Yeah, fantastic. All right, one last question. What's next for Erika Lewis?
Well, book 2, and then book 3, and I'm also working on a graphic novel that hasn't been announced yet, but will be soon. That's just also in the middle grade space.
Cool.
That has something to do with the Salem witch trials, so which is really fun. Well,
12-year-olds?
Yeah, it's a modern day. It's a twist on it. Yeah.
Does it involve the Scarlet Witch or Batman or something?
No.
Okay.
It is definitely it's set in the town of Salem, and it has a lot of the history of what happened there, the real history,
Cool.
part of it with a little twist for kids. So.
Sounds great. Okay, I lied. I said that was the last question, but it's not because KJ, just as I was saying that, posted one, and I don't want her to feel like her question wasn't asked because I know who she is and she's a nice person. So anyway, what difficulties did you find basing your story on established myths? Did you have to change your story to align with the myth?
Yes and no. I think with every myth, you're taking the fabric of it. You're taking pieces of it. I'm giving the personality to the teacher warrior goddess who's at the school. So I'm imparting some of what I learned about her, but I'm sort of going off that. And in this particular story, the object that I spoke of in that first sentence, that is unleashed is right out of Irish mythology, and it's probably one of their biggest things that are talked about. So I tried to stick as closely as I could a little bit to it. The way it was originally worked and designed, but then because it becomes such an integral part of the story, I then sort of went off the rails partway through it. So there's things in there, that you stick to traditionally. Like there's a stone circle at the school, and talking about a little bit about what that's about. And, but when you're writing for kids or when you're writing fantasy at all, you always kind of go off in a different direction on it because other people have used these things before. There's very few things that haven't been tapped into. And so our job is to really make it feel new and fresh and different. Even down to the kinds of creatures that are in there. Even though you may know the name of them, they're going to be a little bit different in this kind of story, So yeah, you kind of stick to it a little bit, and then you kind of, at least me, I just kind of go off the rails a little bit.
You make it sound fascinating, though. I think this sounds like a terrific, fun book, and
Thank you.
I bet this does very well for you. Hey, Erika, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much for having me.
You bet. All right, sneakers. Remember what I said about the small group writing retreat at Eureka Springs. Grab a seat at the table while you can by emailing me at willbern@gmail.com. That's WILLBERN@gmail.com. Or next week, it will be up on my website. But then it could be a free-for-all. So who knows? And of course, I got to mention our annual writers conference, WriterCon. It's got its updated webpage. We've got over 50 speakers at this time. I'm starting to put together the schedule, and I think, there's something there for every kind of writer, agents, editors, educational things about writing, about marketing, fiction, nonfiction, whatever it is. And if you register now, you can take advantage of the early bird price. Let me just say that even though inflation is rampant in the whole rest of the world, we haven't raised our prices one penny. The hotel we're at has, but we haven't. That might change. So please, if you're thinking about coming, register now and get that early bird price. The website is writercon.com, WRITERCON.com. Okay? Until next time, sneakers, keep writing. And remember, you cannot fail if you refuse to quit. See you next time.